Africa just produced its best ever World Cup, and one phone call reminded everyone where the power really sits. July the 1st, Balogun, Americans' top scorer, sent off against Bosnia. Then on Sunday, FIFA suspended the ban. Africa's best ever World Cup. The numbers first. 10 African teams qualified. The previous best in 96 years of World Cups was 2. Points taken off Brazil, England, Spain, Uruguay, Belgium. Cape Verde, a country of 500,000 people, went through their group unbeaten. Just one weekend, 8 of the 9 countries went out in a single round. Nobody was outclassed.
I've been there. 2018, we played against Argentina. We were drawing 1-1, and they scored in the 86th minute, which meant that they went through and we didn't go through. And I remember those moments so clearly.
In between, it emerged the President of the United States had phoned President Gianni Infantino, president to president, and asked for the decision to be looked at once again. And the last time a player was sent off at World Cup and was allowed to play in the next game was some guy called Garrincha in 1962.
We've seen that now, the US and Trump throwing his weight around for Balogun to play. I think it's a discredit to football and the fairness of the game.
Who makes that call for Senegal? Who makes that call for Cape Verde? Like, what message are we sending to the 16-year-old in Mogadishu? What does it mean for Africa's incredible record this summer if the rules can just change just like that because the right guy's got the right number for the right person?
We are still one step away from being where we need to be in world football. Those 85 seats that you speak about, they are individual seats and there's no power in that.
Africa's summer now rests on one team. Morocco came the first African side ever to reach back-to-back quarterfinals. But please stay to the end, as Will and I are going to name one thing that has to change before the World Cup comes to Africa in 2030. Welcome to Power and Purpose, where we look at leadership, influence and impact through the lens of sport. Last week, we asked who gets to take part in the global game. This week, the game gave us 2 answers. Africa just produced its best ever World Cup, and one phone call reminded everyone where the power really sits. Maro is away again, unfortunately. Hopefully he's going to come back to us. He is going to come back to us. Of course he is, next week. So once again, it's just me and our World Cup insider, I'm calling him now, Will Troost-Ekong, who's been working as a broadcaster at the tournament. And this week, Egypt took the world champions Argentina all the way. Oh my gosh, that was close, wasn't it? But it wasn't enough, and that's part of our story tonight too. But please stay to the end. We know you always do anyway, but please stay to the end, as Will and I are going to name one thing. We're going to name one thing that has to change before the World Cup comes to Africa in 2030. Yes, you might not have got that. It comes to Africa. It's going to Morocco as part of Spain, Portugal, Morocco in 2030. That is exciting. But we haven't told each other our answers. We're going to hold on to the end. But we're going to name one thing that has to change before the World Cup comes to Africa in 2030. So Will, you have a different background once again. You're on your travels, I guess.
Yes.
So where are you today in the world, Will?
This is one part of home. I'm in Doha. I'm back in Qatar. Preseason has started. I had my second training session today. That's why I probably look like I've been dragged through a bush because it's been hard, 45 degrees. And back to my day job. It's been refreshing. I obviously had a long break, almost 2 months and a bit. And it's not easy when you're training in the gym or running outside by yourself. So I still remember how to kick a ball, which is important on day 2. And it's been good. We've got a new coach in. Of course, you start preparing, new ambition, new energy. And I always feel that these moments are the moments where I remember or get reminded how much I love playing football and how lucky I am that this is now professional season number 13 that I'm going into as a first team player. So I'm loving it. I'm loving every minute on the grass, and that's why I'm back in Doha now.
That's really interesting because for us struggling amateurs, and I'm looking forward to getting back to 6-a-side. So I've missed a couple of games the last kind of like 3-4 weeks. I watched the World Cup, and all of a sudden I am prime Messi in my head, looking forward to going to Finsbury Park in North London to play ball and what's not. I mean. Obviously, you are a pro. You do this as your job, as your work at the highest level. it's interesting to hear that you get that buzz still about going back and kicking a ball.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's a
yeah.
genuine thing, right?
Yeah, it's a genuine thing. And I think sometimes throughout the season, it kind of wears you down. Obviously, last year was a lot for me. I think on the pitch, also emotionally, it was my international retirement, which came with a lot of questions, a lot of talking about and different moments. And then now, of course, changed clubs in January from Saudi to Qatar. So there was a lot going on. And yeah, towards the end of the season, it was tight whether or not we were going to stay in the league. We ended up going on a good run right at the end. But yeah, it takes a lot out of you. And I think sometimes I misjudge how much that actually does. So I was really happy to have some time off and I felt like I needed to refresh. But then it starts itching. And especially when I was in South Africa now covering the World Cup for SuperSport, which was an amazing experience. You want to be out there. And yeah, this is now the closest I can get. I'm obviously still watching the World Cup. But itching to kind of get back on the pitch. And yeah, it's something that I grew up as a kid wanting to do and love doing. So you go back into like a flow state, and yeah, it's great to be out there again.
And it's kind of hot in Doha right now. So what is it like
Kind
training in
of
that
very, very hot.
heat?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, how hot? Give us a sense. Have we got a number? I mean,
45 degrees during the day, at nighttime 36, 37. So listen, any holiday kilos that I had before the sauna training sessions, they're melting them off right now. So no, it's a lot. And I understand hydration breaks here. I know I've been critical about hydration breaks in the US, but no, it's a lot. And it's a different kind of football because you have to temporize yourself. You can't just go all the time because you burn out. But I think it's a great way to get fit. I mean, the harder the conditions are now, hopefully when everything cools down and the season starts, the easier it will be. So yeah, it's a lot, but I've kind of got used to now. Starting now my third season in the Middle East. So yeah, you kind of get used to playing in these temperatures.
Nice. Well, here in London, it's 35 degrees, which is unbearable. So thinking of 45 degrees is just like out this world. And to all those listeners and people watching, yes, I am starting my pre-season this week. I'll be doing two laps around Lloyd Park in Walthamstow instead of one, getting ready for a very competitive Dad's League.
You got this, man.
Held in Finsbury Park. Bro, I'm going to be doing weekly reports, man, because I need to hold myself accountable.
And I feel like we need to see some video evidence as well. Not the preseason, but once you get on the pitch.
Yep. Man, I'm on it. It's going to be like prime content up there with kind of World Cup highlights. Just me in my mismatched kit, still thinking I can become a footballer at the ripe old age.
Love of the game, man. It doesn't wear off. You got to do
it. Absolutely. So listen, let's get into it, right? Africa's best ever World Cup. The numbers first. 10 African teams qualified, a record. 9 made the knockouts. The previous best in 96 years of World Cups, 96. The previous best was 2. Points taken off Brazil, England, Spain, Uruguay, Belgium, Cape Verde, a country of 500,000 people, went through their group unbeaten, which a lot of football fans weren't expecting. I did tell them it's kind of competitive to get anywhere in African football, right? Everyone's good these days. So it surprised me, but didn't surprise me as much as I think a global audience has been surprised. And Will, you've not been watching this tournament like the rest of us. You've been inside it, broadcasting for SuperSport across the entire continent. Give us the one moment that you'll be sat there telling your friends and family about in 20 years from this World Cup so far?
It's difficult to choose one. I think I was just immensely proud to see how well African teams did this tournament, because I think before there was a lot of criticism. Gattuso came out and said, there shouldn't be that many teams qualifying from Africa. But I think the teams have shown that they deserve to be there, and they've given everyone a run for the money so far, I think I've been really impressed with Morocco. I think that's been the team that has really taken my attention from the opening game when they played against Brazil. Cape Verde, I love the story of the team. I've seen them now in the last 2 AFCON, so it wasn't a complete surprise, but for them to do so well on the world stage. And I think maybe also Senegal, they went through a lot. I thought they were going to hold on to qualify, but the game seemed to be 5 minutes too long when they were 2-0 up. against Belgium. So it's the little things. I think we are getting closer and closer. And the thing that I've loved the most about this tournament is it's shown a lot of kids on the continent that it's possible. And obviously now tonight we've witnessed Egypt take Argentina all the way to the end. But there was only going to be one man who could ever change that around, which was Leon Messi. For me, the greatest of all time. Of course, seeing Ronaldo at the tournament, and unfortunately them going out, and what he has meant to world football. So it's difficult to pinpoint one thing. But I think for me, the success so far from the African teams, and I think real potential and positiveness about what's going to happen in 4 years' time. Of course, we still got Morocco now to see what they can do against France. But that next World Cup in Morocco, Spain and Portugal, I think the teams are going to go a bit further, and it's not going to be long before we're going to see an African team win the World Cup.
Well, Pele famously said it, didn't he? He said it while he was on this earth, God bless him. He said that we will see an African side win the World Cup very soon. It hasn't happened, obviously, but it feels like we're edging closer and closer.
It's still possible.
It's still possible. It is possible. I mean, Morocco are, still standing, very much still standing. And it's also been interesting, the response to African teams going deeper in terms of that big sense of surprise. Because, Morocco got to the semi-final last World Cup. So it's not completely unheard of for them to go deep in this tournament. So,
yeah.
And Bastian Schweinsteiger's comments about African teams being wild and unpredictable, etc., just the language, the animalistic language almost, has been kind of like strange, but kind of has opened up interesting conversations about the stereotypes around African countries. And I'd probably extend that to Caribbean countries as well. In terms of how the world, or parts of the world outside of the global majority, see African countries. So it's been a fascinating journey, and I guess in a global conversation, this global room that we talked about in our last episode, that's what World Cups do. They bring conversations into our households. They get us to reflect on who we think people are, and we also reveal who we are ourselves, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that real sense of pride. I've seen, of course, you see some of those comments, we get a lot of traction, but it's been great to see how people unite and stand for the continent. And, there's proof of how it looks. I think there's two ways of looking at it. The way Schweinsteiger described that, I think, isn't how I see African football. What I love to see is the flair. We see the unpredictability. We see the strength. We see the resilience and the real hunger to show that the best teams and the best players want to win with their country on the world stage. And it's also very much been the tournament of underdogs. They're so unpredictable. Again, talking about the Egypt game, 2-0 up with 10 minutes to go. It would have been an amazing story. And for someone like Mo Salah still to get his flowers for what he's done, now to do it on the world stage, someone who's meant so much for world football and has been leading the continent for years and years and years. It's amazing, because I feel like the right players have been, really getting their recognition. And there's never been a question about, okay, you can only do it at AFCON, or you can only do it at your club. Now, you can see on the world stage. And I've got my fingers crossed still for Morocco. I think France is obviously the team to beat. Argentina as well in the same breath. But if there's one team now, unfortunately, they're going to be missing their striker, Saibari, who's had an amazing tournament. It's going to be Morocco.
Yeah, and also I want to shout out Ghana and DRC, because all this talk about wild African teams not knowing what they're doing and all physicality, etc., that was defensive, kind of tactical nous. That was intelligent play. That was following a plan. That was understanding your spaces, understanding your role, etc., etc., etc. That was intelligence in African football.
Yeah, discipline.
That was not what...
No, discipline. And I think that's the one thing that we have to understand, is that as coaches and how teams set up, you go in with different game plans. There's not one way of playing football, and I think that makes it so interesting, right? And even what we saw from some South American teams when we saw France play against Paraguay, was it the last game they played? you need to try and find a way to get an edge. And I think the beauty about football is that the best players know how to really harness their quality and understand how they can defeat someone. There's so many different ways you could win a game. So, you don't want to just say, okay, it has to be tiki-taka football, because that doesn't necessarily win the tournament, as we've seen, because the same way maybe Germany would have expected to just waltz over everyone with the quality and class of how they play. They had their shortcomings too. So it's just open up the conversation again. And I don't think there's ever going to be a right answer. There's different interpretations. And I think that's what the World Cup has shown us today. And people are fearless. And I love that, because the young players that come onto the scene, even a team like Bosnia, their star player have been Dzeko, but then they have so many young players that are making a difference. So it's been great, and like always, stars have been born on this tournament, and it'll be really interesting to see how it goes now for the last run, the last couple of weeks, and who can survive to the end.
Now a hard one, and I'm going to handle this sensitively, but you captained Nigeria, and Nigeria isn't there.
Yeah.
What's it like calling Africa's greatest ever World Cup night after night across the continent on SuperSport, knowing that your own country isn't there?
It's a really difficult one, Leon, to be honest. I have such mixed feelings, because I know it's been a real disappointment for Nigerian football, and I take responsibility. All the players have taken responsibility, I think, from different levels. It's been a mixture of things that weren't good enough for us to be there. So if you look at pure quality of players and squad depth, I'm sure that if we would have been there as Nigeria, this is all if, it would have been a great showing. And it would have been, I think, better opportunity for us to go further than what we did in 2018, just because of the format, and seeing that, if you have 3 points and you have a good goal difference, that could be enough for you to qualify to the next round or get out of the group stage, which wasn't available or possible when we played in 2018 in a difficult group with Croatia and Argentina and Iceland. So it's difficult, because you also have to make a switch, right? So the moment comes and goes. You don't qualify. What do you do next? For me, that was many different things. It also was in tandem with international football retirement, which wasn't a knee-jerk reaction. It was something that I was obviously weighed up. I thought about, it's difficult, because for Nigerians, and we've got a very outspoken community on social media everywhere. We've got a massive population. They feel mixed about that, because they would also want you to hang your head in shame and say, okay, you feel that, but that's not what my life's about. I've always been about getting up and standing up and going to the next opportunity. And I can sleep at night because I know I gave my absolute best, and I also have my shortcomings, and the team also feels that way. And there's still a sense of pride. We gave everything we had, and sometimes moments like this also reveal what needs to be done better. And I think that is what the biggest conversation is now in Nigeria. How can we be and prepare like your Morocco's, or the teams that are organized and playing with young teams with a clear identity? And I think that's something that has been missed for a long time, and probably been papered over the cracks, because of the quality that the team has always possessed. So there's critical questions to be asked, and it's not only about me. My biggest calling now is to see a continuous improvement in African football, and that is, of course, Nigeria on the forefront. How we can affect things to create better opportunities, because when you wear that shirt, it is not granted to me. Nobody has given it to me. I earned the right to play for the national team. I earned the right to captain my team. I earned the right to be in the World Cup 2018 and missing out in 22 and now in 26. So those things are you're a custodian. So, there's things that I would love to go back and change now, which I can't. And that's the beauty of the game. It's once it's done, it's done. But I also want to find ways to move forward. And I think for the continent, it's important to support everyone, which everyone has done. I think it's been so beautiful, this tournament. But then, of course, there has to be questions to be asked, which are going to be post-tournament, how things can be better. And what I would love to do now, and the way that I'm preparing this part of my career, where I also think, okay, there's going to be life afterwards, which I have my responsibility for, is to try and find ways of how I can now be part of the solution to see Nigeria go and reach bigger heights than than we had done when I've been a player. So that has been my focus. But of course it hurts. I would have loved to been there and to be part of that team.
It's a difficult question to ask now, but I'm curious because you've touched on it. You mentioned the potential way of helping Nigeria in the future. What do you potentially see that as beyond playing?
I think for me now is the education part, because we have so many ex-players that have a great understanding of the game. I don't think we see enough ex-players getting involved right from the top. So for me in Nigerian football, it's finding ways that we can collaborate and enhance the federation, right? Because we've been there, we've seen it. The generations ahead of me have done it. We've seen players come back and coach the team. Stephen Keshi, may his soul rest in peace, was the one who gave me my debut as a player, was a captain, won the AFCON, was a coach, won the AFCON, took the team to the World Cup in Brazil, and they had a great showing. So there has to be more of that, because I think it's invaluable experience. But that doesn't just mean that you can translate as moment you stop playing to say, okay, well, how do I now set a team up, or how do I help with player selection or pathways? You need to educate yourself. So for me, that means now that I'm doing a course in sports directorship, both through the University of East London. It's a special course for ex-players, and also UEFA. I'm doing a different course. So it's different ways that I can affect it, because I've had so many people ask me about coaching the team. I'm not sure if that is something that I really want to do, simply because I think there's also needs to be players that think about going one level above that, whether it's going to be in the boardroom, whether it's going to be working with federations, with FIFA, with CAF, with the NFF. And I think that is probably where you can make the biggest change. So it's a difficult landscape, because in African football, the reality is that there's also a lot of politics involved. For me, the key thing was trying to be in a position where I'm independent. I think football has given me a great platform to create that for myself to a certain extent. Where you can work on projects with delayed gratification, in the sense that if I go in to gain experience or have an opportunity to work with CAF or the NFF, I'm not thinking about, trying to get my next paycheck or whatever, because maybe there has been some shortcomings in my football career. So I've made conscious decisions throughout my career to try and set that up. But now I'm just missing that part where I can really understand that part, the business part of football, not just from my experience, but from a level of that I'm talking with qualifications, and I have the right to be in a room, not just on merit from playing or broadcasting, but I know what I'm talking about. So I'm missing that part of experience. And I think the next couple of years are going to be key for me to try and take that in and understand that, because once I've got that, then hopefully I'll be in a position to help and see if there's going to be a way that I can have a role or a part of changes that are going to be positive for Nigeria, but on the continent as a whole.
So leadership in Nigerian football on your mind at the moment, conversation to be continued.
To be continued, exactly.
Amazing. Right. So let's continue to look at the World Cup story for Africa so far. In just one weekend, 8 of the 9 countries went out in a single round. But look how close it was. And it was really close. Senegal were 2-0 up with minutes left and lost in extra time. DR Congo against my lot, England, led at half-time. Cape Verde, or Cabo Verde, took the world champions past the 110th minute. I was watching that late. What a game that was, by the way. And 5 of the 8 went out by just one goal or in penalties. Listen, nobody was outclassed. So, Will, you've played in knockout games that close. When it comes down to one goal in like the 90th minute, what actually decides it? Because surely it's not just talent, right?
No, it's game management. And I think, of course, there was a big talking point about Senegal and some of the substitutions for them because they were in control of that game. It's been a consistent conversation of teams missing the last 10 minutes and the importance of those moments. And I've been there. 2018, we played against Argentina, where we were drawing 1-1, and they scored in the 86th minute, which meant that they went through and we didn't go through. And I remember those moments so clearly, because you can feel a momentum shift. And I think we've seen, and this tournament has shown us so many times, that so much happens in the last 10, 15 minutes, whereas I think also now extended, because you've got the breaks in play with the hydration breaks, you have a longer extra time moments. So it is a moment of maybe concentration, and how do you prepare for that? Because you need to prepare for that in the sense that you are going to be as tired, as mentally worn, and it's very difficult to recreate that in a training session, especially when you're preparing for a tournament when the games are so close. So it's experience, and I think the beauty of it is now is that we've seen a lot of teams changing generations, as you do every 4-8 years, and those young players that would be part of those moments where they've missed out, if that happens again in the next World Cup, they will know how to manage that better, because those moments and those experiences teach you things, and you have to run with that. So for African teams, that has been, I think, the biggest talking points, because they've done so well to come out the group, they've done so well to get to the knockout phase, but what have they really learned that they can take into the next tournament to go one step further? Because you need to be able to do that, and the best players can. It's no wonder that Lionel Messi now finds a way to win against Egypt, and understands the importance of those moments. And sometimes that's also part of reserving energy. I think if we talk about Messi, and my opinion of him as a player is that he understands very well when to push and when to kind of take a breather and read the game. And that is also very much in the philosophy of how Argentina play, because I think the rest of the team carry so much of his workload that they allow him to have that role to be the difference maker. And I think if you look at the teams that do well historically, they always have one of those players that are special. So if you talk about Senegal, I think for me, Sadio Mane is that guy. Whether it's Egypt, it's Mo Salah with the experience. I'm not saying that he's particularly the most talented at that moment in time, but they're players that have been there before and they know how to win things. So is there a way that you can find and build a system where you have those crucial players on the pitch at that right moment, and understand when to, go for that dribble, when to cross the ball, when to pass around one more time, when to have that patience. And you almost need a leader, not just on the outside of the pitch as a coach, but someone on the pitch as well to guide you through those moments. And that experience is invaluable. And you only get that by playing and being there. And so many of those teams have done that now.
Yeah, lots and lots of lessons for all the teams, lots of lessons for the African teams, and that progression, right? I mean, 9 African teams in the knockouts. So 9, right? Is that Africa getting better? Let's have this discussion, right? Because we're having this amongst us as friends of different backgrounds, with Asian friends from America, friends from the Caribbean, friends from all areas of the world, right? So 9 African teams in the knockouts. Is that Africa getting better, or is it the world finally just letting more African teams in? So greater numbers of teams at the tournament. So of course we're going to see more progression of African teams. Which one is it?
For me, it's part of it's the format. I think the format has made it probably fairer for teams to have a chance to get into the knockout. And I think that opportunity is being grasped with both hands by the 9 teams that we've seen progress. I think that the format also gives a better representation of the continent. There's World Cup debutants that we've seen there that have been able to do that, whether we talk about Cape Verde. It's amazing to see. So I think moving forwards, and the amount of talent that we speak about Africa or anywhere in the world, really, there's just more chance for them to be able to get there. And and I think deservedly so, have a chance to play in those all-important games and knock out the teams that traditionally are always there. So it makes the competition fairer and more open. And I think that the 9 teams, they've taken that with both hands. And I would have loved to, like I said, been able to have a chance to do that in 2018. This would have been our chance for Nigeria as well. But we're not there. But I think for moving forward, it will be able to demonstrate and show more of the talent that is available on the continent and make it more competitive. But it's also harder because for the teams that are maybe normally, once they get past the group stage, they still have to play against the underdogs one more time, and they've got nothing to lose when they get there. And I think we've seen that as well this tournament.
Yeah, it's hard to disagree with that. I mean, all I would add is, look at, sorry to mention it again, but Nigeria aren't there, Cameroon aren't there, right? Big nations in world football who've done incredible things. If you look at across the African countries that are at the World Cup, look at the numbers of players playing in the top European leagues. More and more presence of African players. And if we look into the future, and this is where I'm really excited, there's huge investment going into academies on the west coast of Africa. It's seen as the gold mine of football, like big American hedge funds investing in academies up and down the west coast of Africa because they can see the talent that's there. They can see that there's a pathway into the top European leagues. They can see the financial gain of getting behind the development of football in that part of the world. So for me, like this playing out in the way that it has done in terms of African teams going deeper, in terms of Morocco continuing to sustain their level of excellence, is just an indicator of what's coming. And I think maybe Pele was well ahead of his time and maybe got a bit excited at the time, probably watching a very, very good Nigeria and Cameroon team, ironically, when he made those comments, because we know what's coming. We know what is coming. And if those countries are running their football in the best possible way, and this is the vital thing, because you can have the best players, but if you haven't got your house in order, you are going to struggle whatever business you are. But if those houses are in order, then we'll be talking about, look at 2026 when those African nations only got to the round of 16 and didn't get any further or didn't get beyond the quarterfinal. And why did we only have one African team in the quarterfinal? Because we're looking at a World Cup where we've got, a majority of African sides now making the latter stages. I can see some big shifts coming in world football. But I don't think it's down to the players. I think it's down to the administrators. I think it's down to the presidents, the people who are running those associations.
I think that has to be it, because if we use Morocco as the model standards, and that has come from the king's interest in football and sports in general, whether it's the facilities that have been created. What we're seeing now is we see a lot of West Coast Africa exports, but a lot of those have come through privatized academy, privately owned. And I think if there is not a systematic change where we say, okay, federations take control of that and create those pathways, then there needs to be a collaboration, because I think that is another part which I'm really thinking about for my long-term vision, is that if I were to do that in Nigeria and create a way where the players have a pathway, not just to become elite players, but also take advantage of opportunities of scholarships, for example, in Europe, in the Middle East, in America. That is where you can find and nurture and harness those talents, because you need to create all-round players that have an understanding not just of the game, but also a sustainable way of thinking of being a model professional. We have Cristiano Ronaldo, which is the creme de la creme and showing what is possible. But if you have players that have natural ability, because for all the top players that I've seen, whether it's Ademola Lookman, best player in Africa coming from South London, or Victor Osimhen coming from deep the streets in Lagos, there is so many more players like that. Yan Diomande, who's coming now in Ivory Coast, is going to be a £100 million player this window. They've come through pathways which are unconventional, and I think that way you miss out on so much. So there needs to be conventional pathways created, and I think the success that we see now with the England team is the elite. I think it was Elite Performance. 10 or 15 years ago, they invested heavily in all the academies. So I was part of that change. I think where in the UK they realised that the best academies probably were Ajax or Barcelona. And now if you talk about the best academies in the world, or Bayern Munich, or what they were doing in those parts of Europe, is your Chelsea's, your Arsenal's, your Spurs, and all the players that we see represent England now are all products directly or indirectly of those academies. Even if it's Michael Olise playing for France now, was a kid that was playing in Chelsea academy at one point. So there's been a systematic change, and they're reaping the rewards of that. Same with Morocco, where there's their under 17, under 20, under 23 teams winning everything on the continent. And now they have the under 20 coach, under 23 coach of the first team. And he's also bringing those players through. Bouadi, who is a player who's coming from France, who switched allegiance 3 months before the tournament because he can see the opportunity he will get of playing there. There has to be more of that. So there's a balance of players coming back to Africa to represent their parent nation and maybe having that connection and affiliation and wanting to represent. But there's also has to be a clearer, like you said, directive from federations and long-term thinking, which is very difficult to do, because if it's coming from a presidential level, A president might want to invest in sports, but 4 years later, he might be voted out. So can he really see that project through? Is there a way that you can really have someone in charge for 10 years to do the right things? Because FIFA allocate money to each country for the improvement and grassroots level, right? And that's where it starts. And that will start with grassroots level. And the barrier can be so low in Africa, whether it's facilities, footballs, boots, kit for kids to even play a level service that they can play on. So those are the easier things that can be fixed, but they have to be done in mind with, okay, we are preparing a crop of players that's not playing the next World Cup, but we're talking about 12 years from now. So 3 editions from now, that's where we're going to see the result of what we're investing now. But who has that long-term vision and has that interest to do that? Because I think if you can combine those things, that's where the magic lies, because the interest and willingness of the young kids to become football players and talent is in abundance. And I think the more players that can come back and help create those pathways, the better it will be, because there's the experience that's invaluable that would have seen it and be able to guide them. So, I think you hit the nail right on the head there, because I think that is eventually where it lies and where the biggest change can be made and the most impact can be felt.
Yeah, listen, there's so many gems you've just dropped there and so many things I'm thinking about as a result of the things you're saying. And one of the things I've been thinking about a lot around this World Cup is the leadership of world football, right? So the way it works, for those who may not be familiar with this, is FIFA have a FIFA Congress. And that Congress is the Congress that elects the president, that kind of oversees all the governance, that oversees any kind of big decisions, significant things that world football does, right? And that's governed by 211 seats across the world. Now, Africa as a continent has 54 of those seats. So that's a significant influence, right? Europe, in comparison, have 55 seats. Now, I've always thought about this in terms of an alignment of maybe experience to some degree with the Caribbean. Now, the Caribbean, we don't think about the Caribbean as a world force in football, but they have 31 seats around that Congress. So collectively, Africa and the Caribbean have 85 of the 211 seats. So if there was an alignment in terms of what the Caribbean nations were thinking and the African nations were thinking around the development of football, around their own positioning in the development of world football. And, I've been around lots of Caribbean nations, big ambitions, but low resource a lot of the time, need more significant support. So in the interest of fairness and the development of the world game, you would expect more investment in those areas. And I don't have the facts. I'm not calling FIFA out on this. But I'm just making the point about if there was an alignment of those 85 presidents of the football federations across Africa and Caribbean, that is powerful. So why aren't those conversations, because I'm assuming they're not happening in terms of the direction of travel of the world game, supporting those regions in the world? I mean, Will, I'm not expecting you to throw an answer back to me, but it's something that's been on my mind a lot, because we look at the partnerships between African nations, Barbados and Ghana, Jamaica and Ghana. Like, there's lots of affiliations that are happening beyond football in terms of being able to have access to countries, sharing trade, etc., between those countries. Surely we need to see more conversations, at least, around that happening in football, because 85 seats around a table with 211 is a powerful place to be.
Yeah, and I think, like you said there, it's for me, those seats also need to be occupied by the right people, and they have to be occupied by football people. So I would love to see more of my senior ex-colleagues and the generation of players that I've played with have ambitions to be part of those conversations and understand the importance of those collaborations. And that's not just only about men's football, because I think I have conversations with the captain of the Super Falcons, for example, if I bring it back to my understanding and my world. And even in those things, there needs to be a complete transparency in sense of how things can be done, how things need to be improved, and how pathways need to be created, but also I think just a level of equality, because we can see improvement in that. I mean, it's been no surprise that what has been invested in soccer in the US for the women's team has shown now that they've always been competitive for the World Cup. And then now when we talk about African women's teams, still there's conversations about difficulty traveling, tournaments being moved because from higher powers that hasn't come at the right time, or they're fighting about TV rights. So all these conversations need to be brought to the light. And I think that the people that need to be there in those conversations are the ones that have actually experienced it and lived it, because I think then you can really see where the change needs to be made, and not theoretically from positions of not complete understanding of what it's like being a player or the ambition of playing. So, but that also comes back to my first part about the education part. So how many of my ex-colleagues or senior colleagues have the interest to be able to qualify to be in those seats? And I think that is the real part. And I'm very happy to see that there's opportunities that are being created, whether it's through the PFA, which again is already an elite group of players that might have played in the UK, but anyone else who hasn't been able to understand that there is possibilities out there. And I think that the generation that we're seeing now of players where they're doing UEFA courses or CAF courses and coming back to fill those seats where they can really make those decisions and change and empower those collaborations is the key thing, because that has to be just as important and as cool, and players having an ambition to think about beyond the 10, 15, 20 years that you might be lucky to play. Because now we see Ronaldo and Messi playing at 41, or Vazzinho at 40 at the World Cup. But that is a handful if you talk about the thousands, not millions, players that they would have competed with as kids, as in generations, to be there. And that's not where the story should end. That's where it should be the beginning, and everything that you'd have learned is invaluable experience that you can bring and hopefully make change in the long term. Because if we don't do it from that way and the collaboration there is not in the right way, then those 85 seats that you speak about, they are individual seats, and there's no power in that. There needs to be a collective, and I think that's where there can be change, not just for individual nations, but for the whole continent, and whether that is the Caribbean or whether that's Africa, but any place that's underrepresented, and where structural change needs to be done for success to be achieved. And I think that's where it really lies. And I think this is also an answer I need to sleep on and think on, but that is my first thing that I think of about how that can be used more in a more powerful way, and a more progressive way.
Yes, 100%. Ex-players are a massive part of the answer here. More and more are coming through, more relevant people. Jason Roberts, good friend of mine, he's at CONCACAF doing some fantastic things there. Obviously, there's others across the continent of Africa, like Samuel Eto'o. Didier Drogba made a good run of it to try and become the president in Ivory Coast. Women's football, there's lots of great examples. The Norwegian FA president, Lisa, what a great job she's doing. And that is a country that is really motoring in world football, the developments of their talents, where they're finding themselves in men's and women's football. So there's things to be positive about. And interestingly, this is not something that FIFA, UEFA, CAF are against. They're encouraging it. They're setting up courses. UEFA have a master's course, MIP. FIFA, I know, have their kind of courses for former players. I think there's lots of positive things going on. And it will be interesting to look at what world football looks like in terms of its leadership in 5 years and 10 years from now, because I think that's something to be excited about. And I think vitally that will absolutely help the progression of African football and world football. This isn't just an Africa conversation. Yeah. This is world football that'll be in a better place. Very briefly, because I have been rabbiting on about the things that I think about in my sleep and when I wake up first thing in the morning. But Senegal, we've seen Senegal at this World Cup. We've seen Egypt just now in this World Cup, 2-0 up right to the late stages and still go out, right? So for me, I have not played at any level, as our watchers and listeners know. So I'm asking you, what actually happens there? Is it fitness? Is it experience? I know you touched on earlier in terms of having a Messi and he just knows. He's walking, he's strolling about, he knows when to strike. But what happens to be 2-0 up and then just fall apart essentially?
Yeah, experience. It has to be experienced on the pitch. I don't think it's a level of fitness, because all the players that we're seeing on show are players that we would have seen on world stages playing in top leagues, top clubs, and this is not something that's new for them. So it's the experience. I also think it's the experience from the coaching, whoever is in charge to be there. The one thing that I would love to see is coaches that have done well with African nations to qualify their team also have a chance to get the experience of working with those teams at the tournament. So whether that is Ghana, who of course had Coach Eto'o, who has been so influential. I think has earned his stripes in Germany, has brought them to the World Cup 2 times, but then didn't have the chance to coach them at the World Cup. You need to have those, or Faye, who is the coach of Senegal. It's those lessons from those games that will give them a better understanding. And I think if you can find a way, and this is all a cost that you're paying for teams going out at the moment with the bad experience, but still taking that. And I think especially for the younger players that have been part of that, and trying to find a positive, which is very difficult to do, because once you're out the World Cup, you want to cry, you want to go home, you want to forget about it, and it's your opportunity you worked for 4 years. But still trying to find a way to say, okay, let's turn it around, and there's going to be another chance. And I think that's the only thing which I've found maybe a little bit difficult to see, whether we talk about Senegal, and some players have come out and said that they don't want to play anymore if it's under this coach, because they went out that way. Is that can't be the answer. You have to find a way to say, okay, we have to qualify again, whether that's going to be without Mendy, Koulibaly and Mane, and then when we're going to be there the next time, we'll know what to do at that moment, and taking responsibility, because I think whilst you're on the pitch, that is your chance to really make the difference. And players that are coming onto the pitch, the substitutions maybe coming on and understanding the importance of playing those last 10 minutes or 15 minutes or 20 minutes. That's where the world class lies, because the squads need to make the difference. And I think that is the thing that we will probably be looking at now for improvement for Africa as a general. Because we've seen that's been a shortcoming for many of the teams that have done better than what they've done before to go to the next level. But for many teams, there's the first time that they're there, or generations the first time that they're there. So there's only one way to learn, and to gain experience from that, and to implement it for the next tournament.
Yep, gaining experience, learning, moving on, being better the next time, I think.
And getting back up again. That's it.
That's the flow, getting back on. So, right, I want to talk about the phone call, because while Africa was learning about how much fine margins cost, the tournament showed everyone how the game is really run. The facts: July the 1st, Balogun, Americans' top scorer, sent off against Bosnia. A red card means an automatic 1-match ban, no appeal. That rule had applied to every red card in this tournament. Then on Sunday, FIFA suspended the ban, citing Article 27 of its own rulebook, and Balogun played the next round. In between, it emerged the President of the United States had phoned President Gianni Infantino, president to president, and asked for the decision to be looked at once again. FIFA points out it has done this before. Ronaldo, Otamendi, Caicedo all had bans that were deferred. The Americans say evidence was looked at and it was a proper appeal. However, Belgium called it astonishing and appealed. And the last time a player was sent off at World Cup and was allowed to play in the next game was some guy called Garrincha in 1962. He wasn't bad, by the way. Young people, Google him. You'll see some hot stuff going on YouTube. But Garrincha in 1962. So Will, let's look at the football mechanics first here, right? Put yourself, you're in that Belgium dressing room, 4 days preparing for a team without its most dangerous forward. And on Sunday night, message pops up on the team WhatsApp. Now he's playing. What does that do to a squad?
First and foremost, it was a game that I covered. I did this game for SuperSport. Bosnia, USA. deserved to win, and the red card was deserved. I think it was a situation maybe similar that we saw with Kelly in the Champions League against Galatasaray for Juventus, where he jumped up. I think he tried to use his body, stepped in his ankle, and it was accidental. I don't think there was a real meaning of him trying to injure another player, right? That's my interpretation of what I saw. But it was a red card. The way he landed on him, studs on the ankle. The Bosnian player was fortunate to be able to walk away from that situation. And I think it is, it undermines the game when you make rules and a player gets a deserving red card and then has a chance to play again later in the tournament because there's a call president to president. Listen, we never know what happens behind closed doors, but, you read in between the lines and you see that this happens. So for Belgium, I think they would have been very disappointed, understanding that is right. I think maybe for a squad like Belgium, they probably wouldn't have been intimidated because, they've got a team that tends to go far in tournaments, a lot of experience. But it wouldn't have been fair because if the US would have progressed now and Balogun would have scored a hat-trick that day, how would you ever explain that in the future? So I always find it very difficult to accept decisions that get made in boardrooms or after games have finished. If people during the game, they don't complain or it's a fair decision. So whether we've seen that now in the AFCON final, whether we've seen that now in the US and Trump throwing his weight around for Balogun to play, I think it's a discredit to football and the fairness of the game. And when a team loses or a player gets punished for something which is rightfully the rules of the game, that there shouldn't be such thing. And I don't think those exceptions should be made because if you do that, where does it start? Where does it end? And it was disappointing, but I think football prevailed in the end. I think US have been amazing this tournament, represented the continent the country very well as a host nation. But it probably would have been very unfair if Belgium would have gone out and Balogun would have been the player that made the difference. So, I think if that would have been my group chat, there would have been a lot of questions and probably all kinds of words that I wouldn't be able to say on our podcast for our listeners. Yeah.
No. And look, someone put it to me, really interesting question. They said, well, Leon, who makes that call for Senegal? Who makes that call for Cape Verde? Like, what message are we sending to the 16-year-old in Mogadishu, in terms of what we talked about last week with the referee not being able to make it at the World Cup because of the visa situation? Like, for all of these accomplishments, if there aren't those kind of phone calls going in for African nations or nations, then what does this really mean for the integrity of the game? What does it mean for Africa's incredible record this summer if, like, the rules can just change just like that because the right guy's got the right number for the right person?
That means that we are still one step away from being where we need to be in world football. And that comes back to having the right people in the right places. Not saying that they should be the people that make those phone calls, but in the same way that phone calls should have been made, people in those positions should also be able to contest it. And first and foremost, you need the right representation there across every level to be able to do that, because I'm sure once that phone call was made, there's still a lot of conversations that were had for that to be sanctioned or unsanctioned. And there needs to be people in that conversation that can say, no, this isn't right. And fair play should be at all times atop of the game. So we are still away from that. And that will be the progression for all the continents, and the representation is, like I said, we need to have the right people in the right places for it to be fair. And I think once we get there, then we will see everything else prevail.
Absolutely. So Africa's summer now rests on one team, Morocco, who put out the Netherlands on penalties, beat Canada 3-0 and became the first African side ever to reach back-to-back quarterfinals. On Thursday night, when this is going live, so everyone's probably listening to this before the game, Morocco play some small nation that is okay at football, I guess, called France. A rematch of the 2022 semi-final. You've seen both Morocco campaigns. 22 felt like a miracle nobody planned, whether it was or wasn't. That's how it certainly felt at the time for maybe the majority of football fans. But what's different about this team, this Morocco team?
The youthfulness. I've been so impressed. One player, Bouadi, 18 years old, midfielder, playing with, against Brazil, against the best teams in the world on paper, and holding his own. But there's too many players of the Moroccan team to name. And the most beautiful thing about that and the generation is that there's players there that would have come up the ranks through Morocco, who would have won with this same coach at youth level. And that now we are seeing them be able to create a culture, playing style that can compete with all the best teams in world football, which of course France is very much in the conversation for. So it's going to be an amazing game. As someone who is born in the Netherlands, being half Dutch, Morocco-Netherlands was a game that felt, had a lot of weight to it. I think not just for the footballing reasons, but I think also for the multicultural living situation in the Netherlands. And the thing that I thought was amazing was that there was a lot of talk also from ex-players, players that I very much respect in the Netherlands, who said that players that choose to play for Morocco, who are not born in the country, do so because they're not good enough to play for the Netherlands or France or Belgium or whatever. And then this game plays out the way it does, with a team that was so hungry and fearless and dominated, I think, in my opinion, a Dutch squad that was very much also tipped by some of the supercomputers and predictors as a team that could potentially win the tournament. So, same for France. I think if they underestimate this team, it can be a very expensive lesson. But it's going to be a very tough game for Morocco because, in my opinion, France have got the best squad at the tournament available, player for player, and the depth and everything that comes with it. So, it will be interesting, and I would love for Morocco to be successful because, like I said before, for the continent, it will be amazing. And again, it will be another proof that with the right planning and harnessing and development of talent, nothing has a limit. And who knows, that could be the team that can make Africa the world champion this time through Morocco. So it's going to be interesting, and I can't wait for the game, to be honest.
Well, listen, put it all together, and this fortnight told one story. 9 teams proved Africa has the talent. One weekend showed how much is still missing. And one phone call showed everyone how the game's power actually works. But here's why it doesn't end on a sad note. In 2030 even, the World Cup comes to Africa. Morocco is a co-host. So the question I had planted at the start, and remember, we haven't heard each other's answers just yet, is before the World Cup lands in Africa, what is the one thing that has to change?
The one thing for me that has to change has to be the accessibility to the tournament for everyone, including the fans. I think the story that we saw this tournament with Vozinho and playing his amazing game in the opening game and wishing that his mother was there, but she couldn't get there because of visa issues. Of course, the referee from Somalia that we would have loved to see, be there, part of the world stage. Football is for all, and I think there has to be a way to be able to accommodate all the fans, whether it's also with the pricing of the tournament, the tickets, the traveling, the ability to get the support needed for the best teams to prevail. So that has to be my thing for the next World Cup, to be able to see more accessibility for everyone to enjoy the tournament, and also for everyone the possibility to play. I think we've seen that now with the opening up of the format with more teams there. But I think the same thing has to be done for the fans and possibility to watch the tournament, because that's what makes the game, right? And what makes it the best tournament in the world.
Yeah, well, that's super, super interesting. My one is I want to see the African federations and I want to see the Caribbean federations collaborating before the next World Cup. I want to see them coming together and using those 85 collective seats to make sure that we're pushing for positive development and change for world football across all areas of the world, of course, but looking out for what's happening across the continent of Africa, what's happening across the Caribbean, and being a louder voice around that decision-making table. And I would love to think that we'll have more former players involved at the very highest level as part of that as well. So fingers crossed for some of those changes going into what I'm already excited for, 2030. So let's watch this space. So if this one made you think, if this episode has really got you thinking, please do subscribe to make sure you never miss an episode of Power and Purpose. The clips will go up across our social channels all week. So thank you for liking, sharing, telling your friend down the pub all about what we're talking about, engaging. We really do appreciate all the support you're giving us while we grow this community. So tell us in the comments about how we get better. Is African football getting better? Is it just because there's more teams? We'd love to know what you think. You've heard what we think. And if you're watching on Thursday, Morocco versus France, which is actually at the time of recording, this is going out tonight, Will be sharing his pre-match take on our channels right about now. So just go and have a look at our channels to get some more thoughts from Will on what he thinks is going to go down tonight for the Morocco versus France game at the time of recording. So until next time, thank you so much for listening to Power and Purpose.